Hi, here's how to remove, disassemble, and reassemble traditional square tapered cranks. Square taper cranks are attached to the bottom bracket spindle with a bolt. You'll need a wrench like this Park Tool CCW15 I'm using to remove the bolt from an old set of 1970s Campagnolo Nuvo record cranks. Pop out the washer too. Some cranks have a self-extracting mechanism, whether built-in or aftermarket, like these discontinued Sagino Autex units. This is very handy to have when you're out on tour because you only need a single Allen key to remove the crank. Newer cranks, like these 2006 Campagnolo Centaurs, require an Allen wrench. This one, 8mm. You'll need an extractor to pull the crank off the bike. This CP1 from Park Tool has a built-in wrench handle. Thread the head of the tool into the center of the crank. Then snug it up. Now simply rotate the tool handle clockwise and the push pin in the tool will force the crank off the bottom bracket spindle. If you want to disassemble the crank to clean it or replace worn chain rings, you'll need a few more tools. On a triple, you'll have to remove the inner or granny ring first, typically with a 5mm Allen wrench. Now, these things can be on pretty tight, so no doubt you'll have to employ a fair amount of elbow grease to break the bolts free. Really use caution here though. Those teeth are razor sharp. Once they're free, remove all the bolts and the ring. On this Campag record triple, we need to remove the bolt that attaches the rings to the crank arm. Don't lose that spacer. Use this little tool to stabilize the chainring fixing nuts while you remove the bolts with the trusty 5mm Allen wrench. Take out all the chainring bolts now around the spider. And pop out the fixing nuts. Save those, you'll need them later. Now's a good time to clean everything up. When replacing modern ramped chain rings, gear timing is critical, so make sure you get the right chain ring. The first thing to do on any crank set is make sure that the pin on the outer ring is lined up with the crank arm. This pin stops the chain from wedging between the two. Use a dab of grease on your bolts. The first bolt you'll use on a Campag record triple is the longest, that fastens the outer and the middle ring to the crank arm. There's a very thin spacer that goes between the big ring and the crank arm. If you have the pin on the big ring aligned correctly behind the crank arm, the stamped timing mark on the ring will be in the correct position. Line up the next ring with its timing mark. Remember that spacer? Make sure you put it back. Replace the bolt and tighten it up. Now you can replace all of the chainring nuts, flip over the crank, and replace the bolts. If you need to stabilize the nuts while you tighten the bolts, whip out your trusty specialty tool to do the job. Again, check the timing marks and line up the granny ring. Bolt it on, and you're ready to put the crank back on the bike. First, on ramped rings, recheck that the timing is aligned. To reinstall the crank, simply reverse the removal procedure, making sure to tighten the crank bolt up to the manufacturer's recommended torque setting.